Hello, and welcome to another episode of the All Things Considered CX podcast. I'm your host, Bob Azman, and I'm glad to have you back listening again to another one of these episodes that we're covering on a variety of topics. And today's topic, I think you're going to find very interesting because it really covers the broad description of CX, and we found an expert that's going to talk about that with us, and Ian Baer. So, Ian, welcome to the podcast, and if you would introduce yourself to our listeners.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Bob. Hi, everyone. So I'm Ian Baer. I am the founder of a marketing intelligence company called Sooth. And what we've been doing now for the better part of the 2 years that we've been in existence is help brands connect with their customers on an emotional level, because we understand that that's really the single greatest point of leverage any brand has in terms of building profitable relationships today.
Excellent. We're really glad to have you here. I love the name of the company too when I was doing some background research on Ian, because oftentimes as consumers we need to be soothed from time to time.
Well, the interesting thing, I'm a bit of a word junkie.
Please.
And for anyone who doesn't know, the word sooth, literally, if you Google it, it just means truth. The origins of the word, going back to Old English, the word sooth, S-O-O-T-H, had two meanings. One meant to bring calm to a situation, and the other was truth, the way Shakespeare used it. Well, because sooth and truth basically sound like the same thing, the use of the word in that context disappeared. It actually became an obsolete word, which was very good news when I sought it as a trademark for a company in 2022. And somebody added an E to the end, and that word soothe lived on in English vocabulary. So the two are completely connected.
Interesting. Very good.
And isn't the truth the most comforting thing?
It is. It is indeed. Ian, before we get into some of these topics that we're going to talk about today, how did you get into this business? Our listeners always like to know that. Did you wake up when you were 8 years old and say, I want to do this for a living, or how did this all come about?
Well, I woke up when I was 8 years old and decided what I wanted to do was catch for the Yankees, but that didn't work out. By the time I got through college, what I wanted to do was I wanted to be a newspaper columnist. So I was a journalism major. I was also fascinated by human behavior and the way people think. So I also took a lot of coursework in psychology, sociology, social psych, cultural anthropology, that sort of stuff. And I made a decision right around graduation time that I did not want to pursue a career in journalism. That's a whole separate story. It'll probably be the first chapter of my book. We'll save that for another day. But now here I am, and I come out of Fordham University with a journalism degree, with a real passion for telling people's stories, understanding their stories. I wanted to be a columnist. That's something that doesn't even exist anymore. And I had this social science background. So advertising was sort of an accidental way in. I started at my first ad agency only because they were hiring and I could type 72 words a minute, and they hired me as what was called a secretary back in those days. But very quickly, I realized that my passion for storytelling and understanding people's needs and wanting to help people by bringing their stories to life in interesting ways. And I've always seen advertising really not as selling stuff, but as much as solving problems for people. So it all sort of came together. And then over the years, I really found my greatest passion was for creating that emotional connection. And that's what has always made my work successful. Whether I've been a strategist, whether I've been a creative, it's always been about finding a point of emotional connection on behalf of my clients that allowed them to really set themselves apart and achieve things in their categories no one else could. And ultimately, turning that into a repeatable, scalable, teachable practice led to my development of the Sooth method. And then I launched a company on the basis of that method, on which we now have a patent pending.
Outstanding. What a great journey. Thanks for sharing that. I want to get to that emotional connection, but before I do that, I want to start a little broader in my question to you, and that is, as customer experience professionals, we are always struggling with the concept of linking brand and the customer experience together. And for some of us, it's like it's a natural, it has to be together. But for others, that's a struggle. Talk to us a little bit about brand, customer experience, employee experiences in there too, and what your findings and your experiences have been.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I don't think there is a separation between brand and experience at all. I think even the most traditional forms of advertising are simply elements of a brand experience. And what we know is that all brands now really are collaborative experiences between an entity and a human. We even speak here at Sooth. We like to say that we don't really live in a world of B2B or B2C. It's really B2I, brands to individuals, because that is the only way anyone communicates anymore. So whether you're talking about employees, whether you're talking about your customers or your competitive customers, you don't really get to control everything they think of your brand. Your brand is what they experience. It is your store, if you have one. It is your website. It is your app. It is your billboard. It is your TV commercial. It is what somebody just posted about your brand on TikTok or YouTube. You want tremendous evidence that content forms brands. Look at what's happening right now with the shift in our presidential election cycle. Whether you are, a Democrat or a Republican, it's easy to see that what the Harris campaign has done is allow people to form their own experience of what this brand is. They have leaned into content that outside creators are offering up and not trying to overly control it. And that's just the way things are. Bob, I was relating a story to you earlier about years ago when I was trying to encourage a large toy company to get into the social media space when brands were really just starting to go there. And their response was, we don't know if we want to be in social media. And I said, well, no, hang on. You're already in social media. You're just not controlling it, because the only social media presence you have are the reviews your customers are posting on YouTube and on Facebook. So I think the more everyone understands that this is a participatory experience, the better it's going to be for everyone.
Mm-hmm. I really love that B to I acronym that you brought up, because honestly, we spend a little bit too much time in customer experience talking about, oh, I'm B2B or I'm B2C or I'm B2B2C, right? And there's so many differences. And I keep going back to the same thing. You are targeting a person in an organization, in a buying mode, whatever it is. It's that person's decision. And those people don't become non-people when they walk into a business.
That's right.
They're still buying.
I love that you use the word mode, because we speak about that a lot, especially in the post-pandemic environment where so many people either work from home, work in a hybrid situation. Everyone is a lot more fluid in the way they manage their day than they used to be. It's not this compartmentalized thing like if you've seen the TV series Severance, which I think is just a brilliant, terrifying piece of satire. We don't live in those separate worlds of home and work and this is my hobby time, and everything infiltrates everything. And over the course of an hour, you might be the CFO of a company, and then you're a dad, and then you're, a baseball memorabilia collector. And that's all happening in the physical environment you're occupying, in the device you're using. Humans aren't compartmentalized anymore. So really, marketing can't be. When we look at people, The data we have on an individual, for example, we have data on 220 million people that we examine and analyze on behalf of our clients. And we see every one of those people through a personal lens, through a business lens, through various special interest lenses, because in the end, Bob, it's all the same you. And by the way, we're absolutely certain that the same emotions that guide your decisions at home guide your decisions at work. If you are somebody who is primarily motivated to do the thing that makes you feel safe, well, what it takes to make you feel safe at home might be different from what it takes to make you feel safe at work. But your need to feel safe, the priority you will put on that over other emotional needs like fun or freedom, that won't change.
Mm-hmm. So Ian, you have worked with, I mean, some of the top brands in the world, and listeners take a look at Ian's profile on LinkedIn and you'll see what I'm talking about. Do you see that companies are changing as you just described? As we're out of the pandemic, if you want to put it in those terms, and the consumer buying behaviors change, are companies adjusting? I mean, I'm sure some are, but are they doing it fast enough?
It's certainly not universal. I think there are way too many companies that still think marketing is this top-down messaging thing. I think if you look, for example, at the recent business stumbles of a brand like Airbnb, and I was actually asked to speak on a news program about that last week. You know, they proclaimed, we don't need to connect with people in the digital space anymore. Odd, right, for a company that is an app. But we just need to do brand advertising, and we just need to put TV commercials and billboards out there that tell people what we stand for. And then they were beating their chest over that. But actually now, if you look at their business performance and falling very short of their profitability goals, a lot of it comes out of the fact that really they abandoned dialogue for monologue. And that is not the way people want to relate to brands anymore. The reasons that you might buy from an Airbnb are quite different from what I might choose, from what my daughter might choose. And understanding not just the who and the where they are, because marketers are really good at focusing on who and where and when, but they need to lean much more into why. The why is what actually fuels success. Brands that are emotionally connected generate 4 times the lifetime value from a customer versus brands where that customer is simply satisfied with the product or service. There is nothing a brand can do that outweighs the value of emotional connection.
So Ian, I love that why, by the way. I was reading some of your writings and you talked about the why, and I think it's an outstanding way to cut through all of this. How do brands achieve that emotional connection? Are there techniques? Is it visionary? I mean, Airbnb, you know, I wish I was in the conference room on the Zoom when the executives are making that decision to find out what their thought process was. But how do companies do that? Because it seems like everybody wants that as kind of a overarching goal, but not always achieving it when their actions don't support their goal.
Well, look, I think one unfortunate factor that I've seen happen over and over again is when it comes time to tighten up a budget, the red lines tend to hit things that have to do with understanding first. Oh, we don't have the time for research. We don't have the money for research. We'd love to measure that, but we don't have the resources, or we don't have a data analyst who's available to work on this. So we're just going to keep putting things out there. And, you know, what sticks. And what has eventually happened, and I think it is what happened, I don't want to keep beating up on Airbnb, but if I try to put myself in the room where that decision took place, well, performance marketing as a whole has declined in effectiveness more than 60% in the last 2 years. That's a stat that the DMA recently published. A lot of that is just because of the digital media monopolies that exist out there, and pricing has just gotten out of control. So I think they gave up on the poor performance without ever really digging into what can we do to connect with people. Because the fact is, and look, this is going to sound self-serving, we built our whole business on the fact that we now have enough data, if we want to invest in understanding, to know why people buy, to know what motivates them, to know what makes them loyal to a brand or what would make them change a brand. And you know, whether you do that through traditional research, qualitative, quantitative, whether you do that through really advanced analytics, or, you know, we have a methodology, again, not to, you know, start selling what we do, but we created a methodology that through the use of AI allows us to generate as much insight in a month as most brands would get in 2 years of research and in-market testing, because we know that nobody has the time or budget to get all the understanding that they need. But one way or another, if brands don't understand why customers are buying from them or not, if brands don't understand why people are leaving, the harsh reality is that's a choice those brands are making. That's a decision not to know, because there are enough methodologies, there's enough data available to us that we know exactly why people are saying yes or saying no to a brand.
Fascinating. Listeners, you're listening to Ian Baer, a marketing expert, and really fascinating with his background and expertise. So, Ian, you talk about data, and in the area of customer experience, we do a lot of measuring. We do, you know, pick your measurement, customer sat, NPS, employee indexes, CXI, whatever it is, whoever's promoting the latest measurement, and companies are collecting all this data, right? And one of the first things I do when I go into an organization to work with them is I say, you know, show me the data, show me what you're collecting, and they'll give me, you know, files and files sent to me, and then I'll say, what are you doing with it? Show me the action, show me the report. You know, not many emails come through after that. So I'm curious, when you talk about data that you have, and the companies are collecting data, is there a gap there? Are you seeing a gap where companies are just not doing enough with the data that drives their decision making, that it comes down to cost, like you talked about earlier?
Well, I think in a lot of cases, we have a lot of the right data, but we see brands using it the wrong ways. There tends to be too much of a focus on demographics and transactions. When we talk to most brands about the way they use data, they're really pretty good at telling you demographically and transactionally what their relationships look like. But, you know, one question I love to ask is, what's your share of requirement? Like, you know what people are buying from you. We work with one client, for example, a beer company. Now, we know how much of their brand of beer people are buying from them. What we were able to tell them through our data is how much of 10 different competitors' beers those same people were buying. So we could help figure out where there were vulnerabilities, where there were opportunities. Well, that's just one example, because that's still pretty transactional. But then when you get deeper into the why, when you start to look for patterns in the types of experiences people choose and the types they don't choose, the attitudes they have, applying things like psychographic models to analyze the behaviors and the leanings and the tendencies that drive people to do this or that. Those are the data signals ultimately that give you a much richer view. You know, as I mentioned, our whole methodology, there are only 10 emotional factors that in a study that Harvard published in 2016 were determined to have a positive impact on customer value. Only 10 things we feel that correlate to the brand decisions we make. So what we set out to do was measure on an audience basis or even on an individual basis the relative value of, and I gave examples before, things like confidence, fun, security, freedom, health, and understanding when somebody's making the choice between the thing that makes them feel confident and the thing that makes them feel healthy, which they're going to pick. That's the key to success. That's where you actually get to create that emotional bond that goes far beyond any level of loyalty or advocacy that you can build, with a points program or a discounting strategy. In fact, what we see, especially the older, more affluent, and more sophisticated a consumer is, the less responsive they are to anything other than an enriched level of personalized service and experience.
Mm-hmm. And Ian, your strategy, your methodology sounds like it's a heck of a lot more sustainable than any loyalty program might be or discounting process. Is that
Well,
what you found?
it is, especially because our data updates weekly. So as things change, for example, we weren't really looking at Tim Walz as a brand a month ago. Now he's a brand we track. When Taylor Swift's tour started to impact consumerism, we were able to track that in real time. Because we look not only at transactions and behaviors, but we look at media consumption habits, we look at social media postings, we do emoji analysis and all sorts of language-based analysis, we're actually able to see practically in real time when things shift for either the needs of an audience or within a category or within a competitive set. And we're able to get to it very efficiently thanks to AI. I know a lot of people are terrified of AI. I understand why. I saw the Terminator, but when used for good, it helps us help people. It helps us make marketing a beneficial practice, not so mercenary, because we can actually help brands market in empathetic ways to the people that they're trying to reach.
It's interesting about AI because if I kind of deviate a little bit in my customer service background, customer service executives are notorious for taking new technology and applying it for one purpose, and that's to cut the cost of customer service.
Right.
And I'm on a soapbox later about car dealerships and why they haven't become better focused on their customers. And what I've encountered, I'm trying to purchase a vehicle. What I've encountered lately is the use of AI that you think you're talking to a person, but you're getting an email from an AI person.
Right.
And there's just, and I'm thinking to myself, houses are probably the biggest purchase a customer makes in their life, but cars are right up there, and you buy a lot of cars. You might not buy a lot of houses, but you buy a lot of cars in your lifetime.
Yeah, depending on where you live, you may spend as much time in your car as in your house.
Right. Is that really the approach you want to take with AI? But I think your application makes total sense to me.
Well, we just use it to crunch through ridiculous amounts of data very quickly, and then to find patterns that help us define people's emotional need set.
That makes sense. Ian, boy, our time is flying along. There's one more topic I want to cover with you before we adjourn our session together, and that's you wrote about Gen Z becoming the dominant spending force today, and
Yes.
the baby boomers moving out of that.
Well, we love
world.
boomers. I think they're very misunderstood, but yes, Gen Z is, when they become the dominant spending generation, they're going to hold on to that for about 20 years.
Really? Okay.
They're another baby boom in themselves.
Yeah. And what's unique about them and their consuming behaviors?
Well, they've grown up very differently. They're true social media natives, not just digital natives. They've only ever known connecting with the world around them through devices. They're very comfortable doing that. They tend to be independent decision makers and information gatherers. They're not that big on consensus. I know it's easy to see them as being so addicted to social media that one might think they're very driven to do what the crowds do, but that's not the way Gen Z operates. They like to look for information. They like to peruse for experiences. And then put themselves into those experiences, even when we see them as B2B buyers, for example. Gen Z they don't like to be sold to. They like to educate themselves and then be intelligent buyers. So whether you're trying to reach Gen Z as a consumer or as a business decision maker, you've got to realize that they need to be engaged on their own terms. They don't like to be instructed. They don't like to be told the rules. You know, one of the things that we've learned is they reject the advice of financial planners. They don't seek out financial advisors. They would rather look for their role models in social influence, maybe entrepreneurs or celebrities they look up to who they think have a really good sense for business, and say, oh, Kylie Jenner invested in that company. I should look at buying stock in that company. So they're much more influenced by the people that they respect and see as their role models in life than so-called experts who, you know, they may think have more selfish agendas at play.
Fascinating. So, Ian, last question, I promise. So, look into the crystal ball for us, and brand strategy, consuming buying behavior, whatever is in your crystal ball, and tell me what's the future holding for us.
I think so much of it does come back to emotional connection. And I think in the end, the brands that will thrive over the next decade will be the ones that find ways to meaningfully connect with customers on an emotional level, because it has never been easier to replicate a product, an experience. The old advertising model, for the most part, doesn't work anymore, because that's not how the growing cohorts of consumers really make decisions. So until brands can show the ability to connect with where somebody's at emotionally, they're not going to be able to differentiate. If you just think about the last time you scrolled through Facebook or Instagram and you came upon a compelling product ad and you stopped on it for a minute, and maybe whether it's a knockoff of a big fashion brand, whether it's a nutritional product that claims to have greater benefits than traditional medicines. Very often, those are tiny little companies that are selling against the biggest brands in the world, but in that digital media impression moment, they are equals. So if you're a brand that has invested tens of millions of dollars in customer experience, and we're going to have the best app, and we're going to have the best data, and we're going to have the fanciest stores, and this is where we source our products, and in that moment, you're on equal ground, you've got a problem. Because you've got that big investment deficit that those others don't have. They may also not have the regulations you have to deal with, if you take the healthcare example I gave you. But everyone has the same opportunity to understand who buys from them and meet those needs. And if you're actually meeting someone's emotional needs, they won't be open prey at that moment of digital connection, because they'll say, no, actually, I've already got a solution that understands me and what I need and who I am. That's the future. It's the only way this can go.
That's excellent. Great words of wisdom there, and foresight in the future. Ian, if our listeners want to learn more, how might they get in touch with you? How would you like the interaction to occur?
By all means, connect with me on LinkedIn. So it's IANBAER. You'll probably see it in the notes of the podcast, but I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn and quite active there. Or you can shoot me an email at hello@soothbetold.com, SOOTHBETOLD.com. I would love to hear from you. Love talking shop and love helping people solve their problems.
That sounds fantastic. So we really appreciate you joining us today, Ian. It's been a great conversation. Went really fast. So that's how I gauge my podcast. When they blow by, I'm like, wow, this was really fantastic. We could go the rest of the day, but everybody's busy. So I appreciate it.
Well, I really enjoyed it, and we'll have to do it again. Thank you so much, Bob.
You bet, Ian. Listeners, this has been another episode of the All Things Considered CX podcast. Please share it with your networks if you've enjoyed it, and always stay tuned for future episodes. Thank you.